Hey everybody, it's Luke Humphrey with the Luke Humphrey Running Podcast, and today we're going to jump into the second part of our marathon long run section. So hopefully we'll expand upon the conversation we had a couple weeks ago with really kind of covering the foundation of long runs in general and starting to get into those marathon specific type of long runs. So I just want to jump into that, and I'm recording this the 10th of April, so Boston is coming up, and I just wanted to wish everybody running Boston the best of luck, and hopefully it stays dry and the wind's at your back. I will be out. I'll be out there Saturday through the race. Come back home Monday afternoon. So be out there cheering for you guys. And then, like we talked about before, if you guys are around, you want to do a shakeout run with us, we will be at the Lynch Chocolate Factory. It's 2 blocks up from the finish line. We're gonna do that Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. We'll just meet and do like a 30-minute shakeout run. Do some last minute talk about where we're at with the weather and all that good stuff, and then take some group photos and stuff. It's always a good time to meet a lot of the people that I know names. I see names come across from Final Surge or in our Facebook group, but never actually get to meet you. So it's a great time to actually get to meet some of you guys too. So with that, let's just jump right in. I think last time we really talked about just building general endurance, and we talked a little bit about fasted runs and fueled runs and things like that, but we didn't really get into more of like how you would actually manipulate the run itself. So last time we talked about long runs that were more simple, but not really any less easy. This one we're going to expand on more of the specific endurance type of things, other than just the general endurance. I'll discuss a few instances where I don't think we would change, like as far as the makeup of the timing and things like that, but all these long runs should occur during a time after you've done general training. So these runs I wouldn't really put in the beginning of your training cycle. I'd put these more in that last 6 to 8 weeks, for some people 10 weeks, depending on how long their cycle is. But really these are marathon specific, so you really want to build your general long run up first and then kind of gravitate into something like this. So with that, let's jump right in. The first one is the fast finish long run. I think anybody who has been following us for any length of time know we've talked about this quite a few times. And this was my first introduction into really the air quotes next level training. I don't quite recall who started it, but my first experience really was from Khalid Kanouchi. He was a Moroccan marathoner, and then he later became a U.S. citizen kind of towards the end of his career. He was always a favorite at the Chicago Marathon. I think he broke the world record at Chicago Marathon in '99. But he's always, super friendly guy. Always talked to us, had quite a few conversations, always said hello, things like that. But he was really known for, like, actually, it's been a long time since I had really thought about what Khalid brought to the table for us. And so I kind of YouTubed some of his races, and like the guy would literally run, this is a time when 206, I think 205, 206 was still the world record. So slow, right? But that was really the uncharted territory at the time. And Khalid he would let guys go and then just be able to drop the hammer for not a mile or 2 miles, but like he could literally run 14 flat at the end of a marathon. So that's essentially 4:30 mile pace at the end of a marathon. It was just incredible to watch. And I remember one time where Chicago Marathon, you used to actually kind of go underneath McCormick Place where the expo is, and then come back out and finish where it does. And now it takes a little bit different route that last couple miles, but that was kind of always his mark, right? And that'd be with about 2 miles to go. And I remember a time where he literally dropped he dropped like an 8:45 last 2 miles to win the marathon. It was just amazing. And that was his staple. Like, he would do long runs and just do the last 2 miles essentially racing as hard as he could, So that was really our first intro to it. And so, guys like Clint Varon and Brian Sell were like, hey, Kevin and Keith, we really got to try this. And, they let us, we kind of just eased ourselves into it, and we didn't really know the exacts of what Cleed was doing. So we just kind of made it up as we went. But, so we tried it, and so we always had a Sunday group run with the Stony Creek Running Club. It was something like the Hanson's Running Shops and Stony Creek Running Club, kind of partnership, but it always rotated sites. But way back in the day, it's a little different now, but it rotated sites. And so one of the sites was this middle school, kind of way out in northern Oakland County, which is a ton of dirt roads, pretty hilly. Like people say, "Oh, you're from Detroit, you don't have any place to train." Actually, you go northern Oakland County, and it's pretty amazing running out there. So, but it was a tough loop, tons of dirt roads, hills. And then they had a track actually behind the middle school. So being where we were as a team, we were pretty competitive as a team. So we'd hit the long run pretty hard. Pretty close to, we probably averaged pretty close to 6 minute pace, or maybe a little under for the long run. And then we would run, we'd kind of we'd get our flats, or we'd leave them by the track. And then we'd go out to the track. And later on, we kind of realized this is where we're kind of screwing up. But we basically did 18 miles. Then we'd go put our flats on and then go to the track and basically line up and race 2 miles. And it was hard. It was really hard. It was a really big gut check, but it was kind of fun too, because part of it was, just seeing what you could do, right? It was the exhilaration of the unknown, right? And not knowing what was going to happen. It was really kind of fun, kind of scary, and really hurt. But it was definitely, and then it kind of gave you this confidence that, oh my gosh, I can do this, and it was hard, but like I said, it was hard. So obviously, but it's something that I don't know, we wouldn't do it all the time. I don't remember doing this run more than 1 or 2 times during a marathon segment. And this was a time when, our marathon segments were probably 14 weeks, and so we'd really, like, our segments would look more, kind of how I set some of the plans up on Final Surge, where, we were training hard all year round. So it's not like we needed to have a build up and then jump in and do the marathon segment. So it wasn't like we needed a 16, 18, 20 week segment, because our mileage was already pretty high. We were probably just coming off of a speed segment already. So we didn't need to really repeat that section of it, right? We could just do marathon stuff. So we'd kind of, do our speed segment, take a little bit of downtime, few weeks of easy running, and kind of gradually, marathon pace workouts. And then really, like, the last 10 weeks would be really marathon specific, our highest volume, all that good stuff. But it was, so I don't really remember doing this more than once or twice during a segment. And it would fit into the time frame that we talked about. Going back to what we did, though, we definitely made mistakes. And the first one was changing into our racing flats. I remember Kevin got pretty ticked at us about that and was like, that's not the point of the run. And so we actually kind of evolved from that. And so then I only remember doing it on track once or twice. And then, Kevin kind of like took the reins on it. And so we would essentially do it where we would do a pretty hard long run, but we'd always end somewhere on the Paint Creek Trail, which is from Rochester to Lake Orion, which is right around. It's actually pretty close to where that middle school is. But we would end it so that where the hard section would be a couple mile stretch, where it'd basically be halfway between Lake Orion and Rochester, and we'd go all the way to basically Tinkin Road, because Tinkin Road's a pretty busy road, and you can't really cross it without having to stop. So we basically have it so where the 2 to 3 miles would be to Tinkin Road, and then you basically get stuck at Tinkin Road and cool down the last mile back to the duck pond where we always met. So it kind of evolved to that over time. And so then obviously, and it wasn't one of those things where we stopped and put flats on. We just ran it in our shoes that we did the long run. And so, and that was a long time ago. So the lightweight trainers weren't really big. The minimalist wasn't necessarily even around at that point. I'm thinking like it was basically doing that in adrenalines, or what would be the equivalent of the Brooks launch or something like that now. So it wasn't like we were in super light shoes. And then, but we were ripping. We were, most of the time we were under 5 minute pace. when we were younger. I don't think the last time I did it I was under 5 minute pace, but it would be pretty quick, and it would actually be more than marathon pace. It would basically be as hard as you could, and stay under control, right? So it wouldn't be like you'd go out and run 440 and then fade to a 510 or something like that. You'd really want it to be something where it'd be like 450, 445, or 455, 450, something that it'd be really hard, but you could pick it up the second mile too. And we never did this more than for 2 or 3 miles. I think 3 miles is about the farthest we ever went with that. But again, it wasn't like we ran a super easy long run up to that point. The long run leading into it was pretty quick. It was definitely like what I would consider in your moderate to long run pace for the vast majority of that long run. And then you kind of just gradually picked it right up into marathon pace. So even like the mile before, say marathon pace for us was 5:10, the mile before might be like 5:30, the mile before might be like 5:40, 4:45. So it was a gradual pick up to that point and then let it rip for 2 to 3 miles and then cool down the last mile. So, but that's how we did the fast finish long run, and that worked out really well for a lot of us. So some of the points I have on here for you guys is, you definitely want to do this last 6 to 8 weeks of a marathon segment, maybe out to 10, depending on your ability level. But I think that last 6 to 8 weeks is pretty key for most people. I definitely wouldn't do it successive weeks. I think you follow one tough long run with an easier long run the following week. I don't think you need to do a lot of these during that time. I think 1 to 3 is plenty during a marathon segment. And then really focus on the recovery aspect after these. I think pushing yourself to that limit on already fatigued legs will require extra attention from the recovery department. And then from my experience, just getting down to marathon pace is tough enough for most people that I've given this run to. I don't think it's any harder for those who are like chasing Boston qualifiers or new time thresholds to get faster than that. This is going to teach you how to push through late in the game, even when you're tired. And that's really the major component of this long run is teaching your muscles to maintain a hard effort when you're already tired and you already have a bunch of miles on your legs, and really drawing from those. I think physiologically what you do too is you kind of start drawing into those other muscle fibers. So you've basically exhausted the fast twitch or made them so tired that they're relying on intermediate fibers and maybe even fast twitch fibers to get involved in the action. And so that's really what's the nice thing about this is that, so then once you do get into the marathon, you do have that ability to draw from those other muscle fibers that would just normally be dormant because they're not utilized that much during training. So I think that's a big component to that. I think it's a confidence boost too, knowing that you can run for that long a time, be tired, and still hit marathon pace. I think that's a big confidence boost. All right, so, and the other thing I guess I would say, I don't have this on my notes, but I guess the other thing I would say on that, on the fast finish is, so there's a couple ways to do that. Like if you say you found like the advanced plan, you have a 16-mile long run one week, and then the next week you have, I think it's a 12 or a 14-mile long run. So if you're in a position where you're not really sure of what you should do, you could always do like the 16-mile long run as scheduled, and then the shorter long run where you do the fast finish, because it's not quite as long. So you can maybe pick it up a little bit those last couple miles. I've done that before. But I would be careful with this, because if you're already really fatigued into that part of the training, I wouldn't do a 16 miler and then hammer the heck out of a 14 miler. That 14 miler is really in there kind of to get somewhat of a long run in, but also get a little bit recovery, because we're not going the full 16-mile distance too. So you have to kind of play it. You have to know where your body's at, right? And I think sometimes people get caught up in just doing a lot of extra stuff, but then kind of negating how their body's reacting to the training. So if you're getting really stale and you think you might be on the verge of going beyond cumulative fatigue into overtraining, I don't necessarily think I would do that. I would maybe just make the 16-mile your fast finish, and then the next week in a 12 or 14 miler, use that really as a recovery type of medium long run type of situation. Okay. All right. So Squire's long runs. Squire's long run comes from Coach Squires of the Boston Track Club, and this is from the Bill Rogers and Greg Meyer era. The long run was a great way to accumulate time at marathon pace for the week, but also bring the average pace of your long runs down. So to me, it's a great tool to learn how marathon pace feels throughout the course of time. So when you first start these marathon pickups or fartleks types of things that we'll talk about in a second, you feel pretty comfortable, right? You're gonna marathon pace feels pretty comfortable. By the last couple, it's pretty tough, right? So you kind of learn how that pace and that effort feels over the course of time. So that effort is one thing when you're fresh, it's another when you're tired. And learning that over the course of the same run is a big dividend to pay you back on your training. So I also think it is a great long run for those who struggle with the traditional marathon tempos. Like, I have had people where they're just like, I cannot do a 10-mile tempo. Like, it just, I'm all over the place with it. And so this is actually a good way to kind of build some confidence on that, even though I still would want you to do the tempo runs over the course of the cycle, but this is a good kind of way to mix things up and give yourself a little bit more confidence and break it up from a traditional monotony of a long tempo run, but still accumulate a bunch of time at your goal marathon pace. So, but if you aren't familiar with these are essentially long runs with a fartlek in the middle to second half of the long run. So really, you kind of start like towards maybe 40 to 50% into your long run, and then you go through like 3/4 to 85-90% of the long run, and then the last little bits of cool down. So I think you can actually start these earlier in a training cycle. So say 8 to 10 weeks out from marathon, if you're a more seasoned marathon veteran. Use the first miles as a warm up, progress into the moderate paces before starting into the marathon pace fartlek. So I would say if you have a 16-mile long run, maybe use the first 6 miles of that as a warm up into a progression into the moderate and long run pace, and then you can go into the fartlek. So I'd say start with small amounts of time, say 8 times 2 to 3 minutes at marathon pace, and then jog between each hard effort 2 to 3 minutes. So it's 2 to 3 minutes on, 2 to 3 minutes off, and then each long run you do up the time. So if you do this 3 to 4 times throughout a training cycle, then you could be able to maybe get up for 10 times 7 to 8 minutes at marathon pace. And ideally, the recovery would stay the same at about roughly 3 minutes. So you're putting more time in at marathon pace, reducing the recovery time between each, but you're still kind of breaking it up. And even if you look at it from a heart rate standpoint or something like that, your heart rate's really not given enough time to come way down. It's still going to be fairly high when you're during the recovery, and then jump back up to where it would be for the marathon. So you're still going to learn, so from a physiological standpoint, your body's not going to know much difference between a continual run in a smaller blocks, but with really small breaks in between. And so you're really going to accumulate the same effort, even though you're approaching it a lot differently. So I really like these from that aspect. Recovery from each marathon pace, recovery between each marathon pace effort is still your easy to moderate pace. So it's not like you slow way, way down on these. I still want you to keep a fairly good clip going while you're doing the recovery. And then time it out so that you have the last couple miles of your run as a cool down. The first time you do it, obviously there might be some trial and error, but as you get more comfortable with these, you should be able to space these out appropriately. And this is a run where you want to be fueling for. Allowing yourself to keep that effort high is going to be key, in providing that fuel to do so is going to be necessary for that intensity. And then again, post-run recovery is as important post-run recovery is as important as the effort given during the run. So this is actually going to be, this is a run where you don't want to be like, okay, well, I'll go home and maybe in an hour or so I'll get something to eat. No, you got to start the recovery process ASAP. Because again, we talk about recovery all the time, but if you've depleted yourself, and even though you've taken fuel during the run, you've still depleted yourself quite a bit. So giving your body the fuel it needs to recover is what's going to allow you to come back stronger and make those adaptations that you just put your body through. As far as a damage standpoint and a physiological standpoint, having the fuel to recover from that is actually going to allow those adaptations to go through. So make sure you're staying on that. All right, the third one is the combo. And if you're in our Facebook group, I've offered this one up for a long time. If you're really tight on time in a particular week, that's what I get a lot. Like if I have to, would you rather play a game of would you rather? Would you rather do your tempo run or your strength run? And so what I'll say is, why don't you do the combo and do your tempo run during your long run? It's a great compromise. And if you have done the 10-mile tempo, then this is really nothing new, right? The mileage is nothing new. You've done that. Now we're just basically saying it's a combination of a long run and a tempo run. You've probably done this plenty of Thursdays already. So what I would say is you use the first miles as a warm up. And the biggest difference is for a lot of people, and I don't think it is for quite a few of you, because I think a lot of you during the week, you basically just do your warm up and go straight from your warm up into your tempo run and then straight into your cool down, where I would prefer you do a warm up, do dynamic stretches, do the drills, get you ready to jump right into marathon pace, do your marathon pace, cool down, maybe do some other stretching and stuff in between. But, so to me, those are, to me, I view the tempo as 3 separate runs. It's a warm up, cool down, or warm up, tempo, and cool down. Whereas I think most of you just do it as a straight run anyway, which is fine. There's not a ton of, I'm not going to put up a big fight on that. So in this sense, yeah, you have. But if you are one of those people who warms up, changes into racing flats, does your tempo, now you've just combined this as one run. So you've just one big block of time at a running effort. So again, warm up the first few miles, gradually increase from easy to moderate to long run pace. So maybe if you do 3-mile warm up, it's easy, moderate, long run pace those first 3 miles, and then you jump right into marathon pace. So each mile is basically a bridge to the next level of your pace zone. And then do your assigned tempo run at your goal marathon pace. Ideally, this is done for longer tempos, say the 8 to 10 milers. I think that's where this is the best fit. Set up so that the last 1 to 3 miles can be used as a cool down. And so that might mean, you do a 4 or 5 mile warm up and then do your tempo and then cool down 1 mile. To me, I don't particularly care. I don't think that's a big deal. Plus it gives you a little bit more time to kind of ease into getting closer and closer to marathon pace before actually starting into marathon pace. This should also be a fueled run. I think this is a perfect time to practice fueling at marathon pace for an extended effort of time. And you're going to have to go to the well pretty deep on these, so don't dig it so deep that you cannot get out. So fueling during these is crucial. Same thing with post-run recovery. Again, I can't stress that enough. Get on your refueling, rehydration, and hopefully rest as soon as you possibly can. And if you do this on the weekend, you are typically doing in place of a tempo run during the week, so you may need to adjust the days before and after. So ideally, in a perfect world, what I would say is, you still get an 8 to 10 mile run in on Thursday, so it's a little bit longer than what you're used to doing maybe, and then you go Friday, Saturday easy, and then long run Sunday. Or you could even do the long run on Saturday, give yourself Sunday and Monday to recover before jumping into your next speed or strength workout on Tuesday. So there's definitely ways to get around that. Then the next one we have is the mega long run. So I know many of you thought I would never address this. I would just avoid it like the plague. And I'll tell you, it's not making me comfortable. It makes me squirm in my seat. But I'm just kidding. But I do think we have to address it, right? I think because like everything in life, there's always exceptions to the rules. There's always outliers, and there's always a different point of view, right? So I want to talk about it. And this is for all of you 40-mile-a-week runners who love your 20-milers. And of course, I am just kidding. Don't give me any hate mail. I'm just picking on and teasing. So I do think this is an important long run type to discuss. So admittedly, to just give you clear present, I've never actually given a mega long run to an athlete. I've never given one. I don't personally adhere to the philosophy, but I would like to talk about it. All right. So, and I don't have any personal experience with this type of long run. So my longest long run I ever did before a marathon was about 25 miles. And that was at this, I always joke because people say, oh, I know you scheduled me for 16, but I got lost and it happened to be 20 miles exactly. And yeah, right, guys. Well, anyway, but I truly did get lost. And because trust me, I was pretty hangry by the end of it. So it was supposed to be something like an 18 or 20 miler, and it got completely messed up and it ended up being closer to 25. But But from a mileage standpoint and a time standpoint, it wasn't really a mega long run. I mean, it was still under 25% of my week, and from a time wise, it was still only like 2 hours and 40 minutes. So it wasn't like I was out there for 4 hours running a 25 mile or anything like that. So technically, from what seems to be the definition of a mega long run, I was not in that classification based on where I was at with my training. But the mega long run can mean a couple things. So it can be described in terms of mileage or in terms of time run. So when people talk to me about it, they usually express it in terms of mileage. So usually they want to do something like a 20 to 24 mile long run. And so if someone does a 22-mile long run and using the classic advanced plan, this is about 40% of your weekly mileage during the last 8 to 10 weeks of the training plan. So following the plan, if you are following the plan, the longest long run, a 16-miler would be about 29% during the same week. So you can see there's a pretty significant difference in length of that run per weekly volume. And then secondly, sometimes mega long runs are described in terms of time. So for instance, I was reading an article from Coach Greg McMillan, and he says that he'll prescribe a long run up to 30 to 45 minutes longer than what the person is planning on running for the marathon. So if a person is trying to run a 4-hour marathon, then he may give them a long run up to 4:45. So that doesn't mean you're going to cover something like 30 miles because you're going to be running slower than your goal pace for the most part. So they'll just be putting in a ton of time over what they plan on racing for. And so do I agree with the mega long run? It depends, right? So I think that if you are new to the HMM, Hanson's Marathon Method style of training, then no, I am really reluctant to give the green light on anything like that because I have just experienced too many people putting it in their own, like saying, getting a plan and then just saying, well, I really need that 22 miler. And so they'll do the plan and then add the 22 miler and they'll do it a couple times during the segment. And then it doesn't work out well for them. So I think because the training for most people, so like they see, like a Hal Higdon style where there's no 10-mile tempo runs, mileage is lower, but they still see those 20-mile long runs. And so they think, okay, well, this isn't much more than that. In reality, if you go from 4 or 5 days a week up to 6 days a week running, you're adding 10 to 15 more miles a week. That's a significant increase in your training, right? So if you've never done that before, I'm really reluctant because we've already changed so much and we've already added so much over the course of the week that I think adding a big long run on the end of the week simply just, it makes it too hard to get what you need to get in for the week and then do the mega long run and then recover and then keep continuing on with training. There's so much that has to change with how much you recover, how much you rest before, and then how much you have to recover after. So to me, it's a very, very tough sell. Now, I do remember a few times where I've spoken and people have come up to me and said, yeah, I really, I'm running 60 miles a week. I've done an HMM cycle a couple times now, and I recover well from it. I handle it really well. What do you think about doing like a 22-mile run? And then you talk to them a little bit more and the time's not crazy. It's still not, it's like a 3.5 hour long run. Go ahead and try. I'm not gonna sit there and say it's not gonna work, right? So I think you can go ahead. I think go ahead and try it. Just be careful. You have to really listen to what your body is telling you. So the big thing is though, I don't want people to scale back before and after that big long run. So you have to take it easy. So you have to make sure you're fueled. You have to make sure you recovered well after your tempo run. And then you make sure you have to get right on your recovery afterwards so that you can recover for what you're going to be doing on Tuesday. So there's a lot of things you have to factor in. I don't want you to scale back what you do the 3 or 4 days before and 3 or 4 days after. I wanted to just be jumping right into the continual cycle, like tempo, couple easy days, long run, easy day, workout, off day, tempo run. I don't want that cycle to necessarily change. So you have to be really careful with that. So just don't dig the well so deep that you have to get out to. I mean, ideally it would be nice to go out for if you're planning on run 3.5 hours for the marathon. Yeah, I agree with you. It would be nice to say, okay, I can go out there and run for 3.5 hours, but and this isn't meant as a knock on people at all, but I think if you're in that 4 and a half, 5 hour range, I just don't think it makes sense from a practical standpoint. So, so when I'm referring to mega long run by time, I think you have to look at it from a different point of view. So if you're following the plans and you're running long runs at say 10 minutes per mile or slower, then a 16-mile long run is already taking you 2 3/4 hours at the least, right? So for a lot of you, it's probably gonna be closer to 3 hours. And what I think makes that work is the idea of the day before. So you're putting a significant easy run of 8 miles or at least another hour and 20 minutes. So in the last 24 hours, most of these runners are putting in roughly 4 hours of running. That's a ton of running, right? That's a significant amount. And that's going to stimulate all the adaptations that you needed that would also have been provided by the mega long run, but it kind of spaces it out so where that you can actually recover in a reasonable time frame. And so the other aspect I want you to look at is from really a practical standpoint. So using the examples above, a 4.5 hour marathoner, which is about 10-15 a mile, would in theory be able to run a 5 hour, 15-minute long run. And I'm just looking at that from a time standpoint. It seems completely brutal to me. I personally feel like that would cause more harm than good. This is because we deplete ourselves so much to begin with, and we break down during the long run. The long run is a workout, right? And we're breaking muscle tissue down. If we're out there for, half of the daylight hours, man, that's a ton of damage that we're doing to ourselves. So we really do dig a hole that we really probably can't get out of. It's going to take, several days of just nothing or very easy running to get back to where you're actually even able to train again, right? And so that's, to me, is not worth it, because we're sacrificing an entire week to 10 days for one run that we can accomplish 95% of the same stuff anyway if we just space that out a little bit with the Saturday and Sunday setup that we have. I just don't think we necessarily need that. And I get the mental aspect of it, but to me, I feel like you have to take solace from the 10-mile tempos and the whole body of work that you're doing. So to me, a long run is just a long run, right? All it tells me is that I can run that set of mileage at a slow pace, right? So you have to really, you really have to try to look at the big picture of the entire training that you're doing. Now, however, I just think that the risk far outweighs the reward for run over 4 hours. But where I do see this working is for people running 3 hours and faster, right? So going for a 3 to 3.5 hour long run will help these runners, but it's not going to dig a hole so deep that they can't get out of. It's still technically within long run standards when we look at it from a time standpoint. From a percentage standpoint, it's probably going to be a little high, but not crazy. It might be like 35% of their weekly volume, which isn't, it's above, but it's not overkill, right? So it's not like 50% of our weekly volume coming from that one day. So essentially they're going to dig themselves a little bit of a hole, but they're going to, if they recover properly and they fuel during the run and do all those detail work, they're going to be able to recover from it. And I think that at that point, it's probably okay. As far as when I would do that, I don't think you need to do a ton of these. Again, like 1 to 2. So I think when you look at that, there's a lot of different things you can do. And I really leave it up to you how you want to set that up. I think the main rule is you don't do 2 of those types of runs back to back. So if you do a fast finish 1 week, the next week's a kind of, a recovery long run, if you will. Then the next week, maybe you jump into like a mega long run, and then you come back to a shorter, traditional long run. Then you go into maybe like a fartlek style. There's lots of ways you can approach it. So, but you could basically do, if you say 8 weeks, 8 weeks of training that I have dedicated to the marathon, then I would say, you could essentially get 4 of these, extra credit type of long runs in during that. And you might say, I might just stick with the fartlek style and see how much time I can accumulate each time I do it. How much more can I get every week? Something to that standpoint. Or you might say, I want to see if I can go from 2 miles down to 3 miles fast finish and see where I goes. But the only other thing I would say, I guess, is that the last long run you would do, you want it to be a regular long run. So like if I give a long run 2 weeks out before their marathon, that's usually going to be a shorter and easier long run. It's not going to be anything that's straining, right? It's going to be just more about time on your feet and anything. And if anything, it could be a depletion long run and then start your taper process right after that. But, do one last short kind of depleted long run, and then start into building those stores again. So making sure that you're hitting the recovery and giving your body the fuel it needs to bounce back. So so that's a lot of stuff going on, right? That's a lot of long runs for the marathon. It gives you a lot of variation. I mean, what we talked about in theory could give you enough variation for a number of cycles to come up, but it also gives you benchmarks to test yourself if you want to use one long run at a certain time every segment. It kind of gives you a benchmark to see where you're at. I can't stress enough that you have to take a serious look at your own ability and where you are at. It's nice to get some ideas, but you also have to be careful not to get yourself into a position that you can't recover from later in the harder stuff. Because the last thing you want to do is have a pretty good segment going, and then overkill it on the long runs, and then be in a position where the last 3 weeks are miserable and you're overtrained now. So you have to really pay attention to how you're feeling, how you're recovering. So if that long run goes great, but then your next 2 workouts are really bad, then maybe those long runs aren't working, right? Maybe you try a different one, or you really say, okay, I really got to get serious about focusing on recovery that day, the next day, whatever the case is. Or you just say, hey, this probably might be a little too much. I scale it back and stick to more of the traditional type of long runs that we talked about. Okay, so if you're attempting these types of long runs, put a lot of focus on fueling and recovery. I also suggest that you follow each of these long runs with a more traditional long run. Not the next day, but the next week. And then adding too much intensity and duration for too long isn't productive either, because we just get stale. We start to get overtrained. We dig that hole so deep that we never get back to even baseline. And then if you do survive, the taper basically brings you back to baseline. It doesn't take you up to where your new fitness level truly is. So you have to be really, really careful on that. Keep the balance of easy to hard, and train hard, but recover too. And I would say this extends even to easy runs the next couple of days, right? So if you do your long run on Sunday, that Monday is really important to, one, continue with the recovery process, but not worry about what that easy run pace is. If it's 30 seconds slower a mile than what you're used to, it doesn't matter. Just let your body dictate where that pace should be. Don't get caught up in numbers, and just make sure that you are recovered as much as you possibly can before going into the next workout that you have. So, all right, guys. So I think that helps you see what kind of options you have out there. Play around with it. Write it out on paper. See how it looks. See what looks good to you. See what might be doable for you. And then just take it from there. And shake things up a little bit. But hopefully, you guys got some ideas from this. And if you don't want to do the work yourself, we obviously have our training plans on Final Surge, finalsurge.com. Go to training plans, and then we're the first ones there. Luke Humphrey Running, tons of options. I literally have probably over 50 marathon plans, and then I'm actually working on metric plans, guys. I'm working on putting the workout library together, and then I can put the schedules together based on what I have in the Imperial system. So stay on the lookout for that too. But as always, thanks you guys for listening. Thanks for your support. Also, good luck to those running Boston. For those, if you want coaching or anything like that, just go to lukehumphrey.running.com, see what your options are there. Be happy to help you out any way that we can. All right, that's it for this week, and I will talk to you later.